I'm still Aaron Bitter, still a person in long-term recovery, and I want to share a little information with you today about the recovery process as it relates to rebuilding one's life, especially people who've had challenges with the legal system, which is certainly something that's played into my life. I formerly practiced law as a criminal defense and family attorney in the state of Texas for about 9 years. And unfortunately, along the way, had some pretty significant challenges with mental health and substance use issues. And I sort of dabbled in recovery. And what that meant was that I was more interested in still being a lawyer than I was in actually changing my life, living that self-directed life or reaching my full potential, whatnot. I really had not reached that state of recovery. And so ultimately, the state of Texas said, you know what, we don't think it's a good idea for you to practice law anymore. And to be honest, at that time, I thought my life was over. Some people, when they find out that I'm in recovery and they know that I used to practice law, they think, oh, well, you lost your license and you became incarcerated and you must have just got it at that moment. And that wasn't the case. It still took quite a bit of time for me to actually to come to terms with that loss of my professional license. For me at that time, I was not yet a father. My identity was completely tied to being an attorney. I compare losing my law license to clients that I had who had lost their kids to CPS. That's what it felt like. It felt like everything had been taken away from me. However, I was very grateful, very fortunate to eventually just pick up bits and pieces of recovery to where things actually entered my life, and all of a sudden I saw hope, and that's the biggest thing that I try to do today is to spread that hope. And for me, again, it's that. So obviously I experienced some challenges in the legal system, thought my life was over. And what I want to tell you is that it's not. We hear a lot of times on the news that so-and-so was arrested for driving while intoxicated. They face up to 2 years in jail and $4,000 fines and all this. And we think that person's going away, or they got arrested for drug possession and they face this amount of time in jail. And the reality is that in the legal system today, there really is a second chance offered to, especially for first-time offenders, even sometimes second or third-time offenders who have issues with alcohol, drugs, and mental health challenges. Today in Texas, especially in our urban and suburban areas, and even in a lot of the rural areas, the courts have specialty courts, sometimes called treatment courts or drug courts, mental health courts, where a person who is arrested, even for a charge, perhaps a drug charge, an alcohol charge, or perhaps it's not a drug or alcohol charge, but it's they have a drug or alcohol issue. That person gets assigned to one of those courts and is offered the opportunity to start to rebuild their life. But what that means is recovery, it needs to start at that point in time. Recovery can start anywhere, anytime, any place. Recovery can happen anywhere. And so for me, my recovery actually did start when I was on probation. I was on probation for a non-drug related offense, but had some issues with drugs. And I was assigned to a specialty probation officer, which is also a common thing. Again, in a lot of the courts in Texas, there are specially trained probation officers that are actually, believe it or not, there to help you. Sometimes people don't believe that. They see the system as completely adversarial, but I can share both my professional and personal experience with you that there are a lot of instances today in which the system is designed to give a second chance to somebody like myself. And so I was assigned after several infractions, several slip-ups, just not taking my probation seriously, not taking recovery seriously. I was assigned to a specialty probation officer who helped get me into the right programs and helped me find recovery. And so for me, like that was about 5 years ago when I had dabbled in recovery for about 4 or 5 years before that, but I began to take my recovery seriously at that point. I began to put recovery first in my life And I began to actually to strive to see that I had potential, try to reach my potential. I strived to actually make some changes in my life. And along the way, some amazing things have happened. I went back to school at age 37 to become a substance abuse counselor. Was able to attend Eastfield College. Actually, not only was a student there, but a student leader, was able to co-found the state of Texas's first community college-based collegiate recovery program. That is the Eastfield College Collegiate Recovery Program, which is still in its early stages, still building that program. Become a drug counselor, and was able to work in that field for a little while. Also became a peer recovery support specialist, which is basically what we colloquially refer to as a recovery coach. And to come to work for the Associations of Persons Affected by Addiction as a program manager. Today, I'm able to be an advocate for people in recovery, and that's both at the level of just the person who's walking in these doors at APA that needs help, but also at a greater level. I was able to speak before a legislative body at a public meeting a couple months ago, trying to advocate for greater provision of services for recovery community organizations. And for me, what recovery has really been is it's about a sense of purpose in my life. We talk about in recovery that there's many roads to recovery, and here at APA, we honor all roads to recovery. For me, that's meant different things at different times in my recovery journey, but it's really important to me again today just to share that, especially for people that have faced legal obstacles, maybe along the way that legal obstacles also prevented them. Maybe they lost a job because of their substance use issues. Obviously there's going to be some places, some agencies that have some security and maybe are not background friendly, but in my experience, both professional and personal, an overwhelming amount of companies today are what we would call background friendly. And in my experience, I was working for a publicly traded Fortune 500 company and sort of started at the bottom. And as I kept getting promoted, I kept having to do another series of background checks. And there would always be some fear associated with that, but it was certainly that fear was not as great as what would have happened if I wouldn't have even got that chance. And each time along the way, I was honest about both what had happened in my past and what I was doing in my recovery. And in each time the hurdle was cleared and I was allowed to pass that background, that clearance, and people who were part of those background checks actually had shared with me that they found hope in my story. And so I want to share that for people going through those legal challenges like loss of employment or, whatnot, that there is hope for you. There are all kinds of opportunities. Those of us who end up in the system, we lose our voting rights. We lose our rights to bear arms. Those are only temporary though. Today I'm able to be a voting citizen. I've actually run unsuccessfully for public office, but I was sure that while I was running for public office here a couple months ago, I did not shy away from when I was asked about my background, I didn't shy away from it. I tried to focus on my recovery, and that's really that message of hope is very important to me today.